The doorbell rang on a Thursday morning. I almost didn't answer. I don't get visitors unless it's someone trying to sell me solar panels or convince me Jesus has new paperwork for me to sign. But the bell kept ringing steady, polite, and persistent. I looked through the peephole and saw a young woman standing there. She had that "I rehearsed this in the mirror" look people get before doing something they're terrified of. When I opened the door, she smiled nervously. "Are you Linda Hayes?" she asked. I nodded, cautious. "Who's asking?" "I'm Emma Clark," she said. "I think I'm your niece." I laughed once, a short, dry sound. "I don't have any nieces." Her voice cracked a little. "You did. My mother was Abby Hayes." That name hit me like a punch to the chest. It had been 25 years since I heard anyone say it out loud. My throat went dry. "What did you say?" "Abby Hayes," she repeated softly. "She passed away last month. Cancer. Before she died, she made me promise to find you." My hands felt cold even though it was warm outside. "Why?" Emma reached into her jacket and pulled out a small silver key on a plain metal ring. "She told me to give you this, said you deserve the truth." The key looked ordinary, the kind you'd find in a drawer full of useless junk. But my stomach turned the moment I saw it. The metal tag attached to it said, Unit 319, Corpus Storage Co. I stared at it for a long second before stepping aside. "Come in." The girl walked in, quiet, polite, uncertain. She looked around my apartment like she expected to find ghosts hiding behind the furniture. Maybe she did. The place was clean but bare old furniture, thin curtains, one framed photo on the wall, my husband Frank, in uniform, smiling like life was still simple. "Coffee?" I asked, mostly to buy myself a few seconds to think. "Yes, please." I poured 2 cups. My hands shook slightly when I set hers down. "So," I said, sitting across from her, "you said your mother was Abby, my sister." She nodded. "And she's dead?" "Yes, ma'am." I flinched at the ma'am. It made me feel like a relic. "How old are you?" 23. I did the math automatically. She would have been born about 2 years after Abby disappeared. That tracked. My chest tightened. "What exactly did she tell you about me?" Emma hesitated. "Not much. She said she hurt you, that she couldn't fix it but wanted you to know why. Why she stole everything I had and vanished." The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't apologize. Emma looked down, tracing her finger along the rim of her mug. "She said she did something she couldn't explain back then. She said it wasn't what it looked like." I almost laughed. That's a hell of a thing to say after 25 years. "She wanted to come back," Emma said quietly. "She just didn't know how." And I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "You said she gave you that key? What is it?" "She told me it was for a storage unit in Corpus Christi. She said everything you need to know is inside." I looked at the key again, still lying between us on the table. "Everything I need to know," I repeated. "That's convenient. She didn't leave any instructions? A letter?" "She wrote one," Emma said. "It's in the unit." "Of course it is," I muttered. The sarcasm came out before I could stop it. Years of military service taught me to distrust anything that arrived 25 years too late. We sat in silence for a while. I studied her face. She had Abby's eyes gray-green, always a little sad. But there was something of Frank in her posture, that straight-backed calm he carried everywhere. It made me uneasy. "Where are you staying?" I asked finally. "Downtown. A cheap hostel." "You came all this way to give me a key?" "She made me promise," she said simply. "Promises. That word used to mean something in my family." I looked at her again, really looked this time. She was exhausted. Her jacket was faded, her backpack frayed. She had the look of someone who hadn't slept much in days. "Eat yet?" I asked. She shook her head. I stood up, grabbed 2 plates, and made sandwiches. Old habit. Feeding people kept my hands busy when my head was a mess. We ate in silence for a while. Halfway through her sandwich, Emma looked up. "You really didn't know about me?" "No," I said flatly. "Your mother never mentioned being pregnant when she disappeared." I figured. I pushed my plate away. My appetite was gone. "Let's get something straight," I said. "Abby took my entire life savings. That money wasn't just numbers in an account, it was the house we never bought, the business we almost started, the future Frank and I worked for. She took it, and 3 days later, he dropped dead. Heart attack. So, you'll have to forgive me if I'm not exactly in a forgiving mood. Emma nodded slowly, eyes glassy, but steady. I understand. No, I said quietly. You don't. Silence again. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than usual. After a minute, Emma said, She told me you were in the Air Force. I nodded. Logistics officer. 20 years. Retired after Frank died. Couldn't stand the base after that. She said you were strong. She would have been wrong about that too. Our? Emma smiled faintly. I don't think so. The kid had guts, I'll give her that. Most people back then couldn't even say Abby's name in front of me. They'd look away, pretend not to remember the headlines, the rumors, the whispers at the memorial service, the sister who stole everything. I got up and rinsed the dishes just to have something to do. So, what are you expecting from me, Emma? You hand over this key, I open a magic box, and what my dead sister sends me closure from the afterlife? Emma looked startled. I don't expect anything, I just wanted to do what she asked. Her voice was so earnest it disarmed me. For a second, I didn't see Abby's daughter. I saw a scared kid who'd just lost her mother and was trying to finish her last order. I sighed. When did she die? I asked. Last month. In New Mexico. Was she alone? I was there, Emma said. She said she wasn't scared anymore. She said you'd understand someday. I turned off the faucet and leaned against the counter. Understand what? She didn't say, only that everything she wanted to tell you was in that storage unit. The way she said it quiet, certain made something twist in my chest. I stared at that damn key again. Finally, I picked it up and turned it over in my hand. The metal was cool and light. The number 319 was stamped deep into the side. It looked like nothing, but it felt heavy. Corpus Christi, huh? I said. Yes, ma'am. About a 3-hour drive. I nodded slowly. You got a car? No, took a bus. I grabbed my old leather purse from the counter, checked my car keys. Then let's go. Her eyebrows lifted. Now? Yes, now. If I wait, I'll talk myself out of it. She stood up quickly, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. I locked the door behind us, the key still in my hand. The hallway smelled like dust and old carpet cleaner. As we stepped outside, the Texas sun hit hard and hot, the kind that burns straight through your shirt. I squinted, took a breath, and walked toward my car. I didn't know what waited in that storage unit. I just knew that after 25 years of silence, my sister had finally said something. The drive to Corpus Christi was quiet at first. The air conditioner in my car made a noise like a dying squirrel, but I kept it on anyway. Emma sat with her backpack in her lap, watching the highway roll by. Every few minutes, I caught her glancing at me, probably wondering if I'd throw her out at the next rest stop. I didn't say much. My mind was already miles away, 25 years back, in another life that still woke me up at night. The same way you can still feel pain in an old wound even after the scars faded. Frank and I used to joke that our family was like a well-oiled machine, 2 officers and 1 accountant. Frank was a pilot, I handled logistics, and Abby took care of our books. We worked, we planned, and we saved. That was our life. Nothing fancy, just steady. Back in '99, we were both stationed near Fort Sam, Houston. Frank had just been offered a civilian position with an aerospace contractor. Abby was working for Keller Dynamics in San Antonio. She was sharp with numbers, the kind of person who balanced her checkbook to the penny. She also had a knack for trouble. I should have seen it coming. The day she disappeared started like any other. Frank made coffee that tasted like burnt oil. I left for the base before sunrise, and Abby said she'd meet me for dinner to discuss some investment idea. Those were her words. I still remember them. She was wearing that blue blouse Frank got her for Christmas, smiling like she had good news. When I came home that evening, the house was too quiet. No smell of dinner, no music, no Abby. The safe in our study was open, papers everywhere. Inside, or rather, not inside, was everything we'd worked for. Over $180,000, our entire savings from 20 years of military service. I yelled her name until my throat burned. Frank came running in from the garage. He looked once at the safe, once at me, and I swear I saw his heart break right there in front of me. 3 days later, it stopped beating. Heart attack. Doctor said it was stress. I said it was betrayal. I sold the house 2 months later because I couldn't walk past that study without wanting to put a hole through the wall. People talked. They always do. Poor Linda, they said. Her own sister. Pity sounds sweet until you taste it for too long it goes sour. The military offered me counseling. I turned it down. Talking didn't bring Frank back, and it sure as hell didn't make me trust people again. I transferred out of active duty, took a desk job in logistics until retirement, and never looked back. Abby's name was erased from every document, every story, every Christmas card list. I told myself she was dead, and for a long time, that worked. The sound of a semi-truck passing yanked me out of the memory. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. Emma looked over at me, but she didn't say anything. Smart girl. We stopped for gas outside Beeville. She offered to pay for coffee, which was ridiculous, but I let her. She came back with 2 cups and a small bag of chips. I took a sip. You sure your mom wanted you to find me? She was sure, Emma said. She said you were the only person who'd understand once you saw what she left. Understand what? Emma shrugged. She didn't say. Typical Abby. Always half a plan, half a truth. I stared at the horizon where the road disappeared into the heat waves. Your mother ever talk about the Air Force? Only that she respected it, Emma said. Said it made you strong. I huffed. Strong enough to survive her, maybe. Emma didn't answer. I saw her fidget with the keychain, the metal glinting in the sunlight. I looked away before I said something I'd regret. When we reached the outskirts of Corpus, the city smelled like salt and hot asphalt. We found the storage place easily, a row of orange doors behind a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The kind of place people keep things they don't want to remember, but can't quite throw away. Before we went in, I stopped the car and looked at the key again. I used to think Abby and I were the same, I said quietly. 2 sides of the same coin. She was the smart one, I was the tough one, but maybe I was just blind. Emma looked at me carefully. She said you were her hero. I almost laughed. Then she should have picked a better role model. The words hung there between us, heavy and stupid. I started the engine again and drove through the gate. The manager barely looked up from his desk when we checked in. He handed me a clipboard to sign and circled the unit on a paper map. 3 rows down, end of the lane, he said, like he'd said it 1,000 times before. I walked out into the Texas heat, the air thick enough to chew. My knees ached, but I kept moving. The numbers on the doors blurred a little in the sunlight. 311, 313, 317, and then 319. I stopped. The key felt slick in my hand. Emma stood a few feet back, watching me. I slid the key into the lock, turned it, and heard a faint click. That sound, it was small, but it hit like a gunshot. The metal door screeched as I rolled it up. Inside, the light was dim and dusty. I could smell cardboard, metal, and old air. A safe sat against the far wall, green, medium-sized, the exact kind my husband used to keep in our study. My throat closed up. Behind me, Emma whispered. That looks old. It's familiar, I said. My voice sounded like it came from someone else. For a long second, I didn't move. The dust in the air looked like static. My pulse was loud in my ears. Emma stepped closer. Do you want me to open it? I shook my head. No. If there's a ghost in there, it's mine. ID. I knelt down in front of the safe, brushed the dust off the dial, and saw a piece of paper taped to the top. A number written in faded ink. 072755. Abby's handwriting. My stomach flipped. Her birthday. I started turning the dial. Right to 07. Left past 0 to 27. Right to 55. The handle gave way with a metallic groan. Inside, neat stacks of envelopes sat on top of each other. Each was labeled by year 2000, 2001, 2002, all the way to 2023. Next to them was a file folder marked Keller Dynamics, a small cassette recorder, and a thick envelope with my name on it. For a second, I thought the air in that little unit had disappeared. Emma knelt beside me, whispering, "Is that your name?" I couldn't answer. My hand was shaking too much to pick it up. The last time I saw Abby's handwriting, it was on the note she left beside the empty safe. Now it was back, waiting for me, sitting quietly after 25 years. My fingers were still trembling when I picked up the envelope with my name on it. The air inside that unit felt too thick to breathe. I didn't open the letter yet. Something about it scared me more than I wanted to admit. The handwriting was Abby's, no doubt. Same looping L's, same pressure on the downstrokes. She always wrote like someone who had something to prove. Emma stood beside me, quiet. I could feel her watching my every move. She was nervous, too, though she tried not to show it. "You okay?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "But I'm not dead, so that's something." She gave a faint smile, and that broke the tension just enough. I slipped the envelope into my bag and shut the safe. My knees cracked as I stood up. "We'll take this back to my place," I said. "If your mom's ghost has something to say, I'd rather hear it sitting down." The drive back was longer, maybe because the silence between us was heavier. I caught myself glancing at Emma now and then. She wasn't her mother, but the resemblance was strong enough to sting. The same sharp jawline, the same tired eyes. I kept my focus on the road until we reached San Antonio. When we got home, I made coffee strong enough to peel paint off the walls. Emma sat at the kitchen table while I placed the envelope in front of me. It was thick, several pages inside. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. "I'll read it," I said. "But if this turns out to be another lie, I don't want you taking it personal." "I understand," she said quietly. I opened it slowly, like diffusing a bomb. The first page started with one sentence in bold handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm gone and you finally found what I couldn't say." I stopped for a second, exhaled through my teeth, and kept going. Abby wrote that she had been forced to disappear after uncovering financial irregularities at Keller Dynamics, the company she worked for. She mentioned a name that made my skin crawl, Colonel Markson. I remembered him well. My superior officer, the kind of man who smiled at you while measuring where to stab. Abby claimed that Markson was stealing government funds through falsified logistics reports, and that she'd been ordered to adjust numbers to make it look legitimate. When she refused, he threatened to ruin her career and mine. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd make sure Linda lost everything, the letter read. Her job, her husband, her future. Abby wrote that she panicked. The money she took wasn't for herself. She used it to cover up the missing funds temporarily while gathering proof of what Markson had done. She planned to expose him but never got the chance. When word spread that she'd stolen the money, she ran afraid for both our lives. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking again. "She says she took the money to protect me," I muttered. "To protect us." Emma leaned forward. "Does it say how?" I flipped through the next pages. Abby detailed how she'd hidden the files in this very storage unit, adding a small deposit every year to keep it active. The envelopes were proof, each one holding small returns from the money she'd hidden before disappearing. At the bottom of the last page, she'd written, "If you're reading this, it means I'm finally safe. Maybe now, so are you." I folded the letter and stared at the table. Safe? What the hell did that even mean? 25 years of silence, and all I got were half answers. Emma reached for the envelope, but I stopped her. "Not yet," I said. "There's something else." I took out the folder marked Keller Dynamics. Inside were contracts, invoices, and memos, most of them old, yellowing, with government stamps. I skimmed through them. Some were signed by Markson himself. The dates matched the months leading up to Abby's disappearance. One memo stood out. "Funds reallocated for project maintenance authorization by C. Markson." Abby had underlined it and written in red pen. "He made me sign this." It felt like the ground shifted under me. For years, I'd built my anger around the idea that my sister was a thief. Now I was staring at proof that maybe she was the only honest one. Emma was reading over my shoulder. "She tried to prove it," she said. "Yeah," I whispered. "And maybe it killed her." I sat back in my chair. My mind spun through every memory I'd buried, every argument, every phone call, the last time I saw her face. All of it looked different now. Emma broke the silence. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. My instincts kicked in, the same ones that kept me alive during 20 years of military bureaucracy and bad coffee. If what she's saying is true, Markson didn't just steal money. He buried the truth with her reputation. Emma nodded. "So, what now?" I looked at her. "Now we find out if he's still breathing." The kid blinked, probably not sure if I was joking. Truth is, I wasn't. I grabbed my laptop from the living room. the same one I mostly used for paying bills and yelling at online banking portals. It took me 5 minutes to find an article. Colonel Charles Markson retires after 30 years of distinguished service. The photo showed him shaking hands with a general, grinning like the devil had just gotten promoted. He'd retired in 2002, 2 years after Abby disappeared. "Son of a bitch," I said under my breath. Emma leaned closer. "So he got away with it?" "All. Looks like it," I said. "But not forever." I scrolled through search results, finding more. Keller Dynamics was still active under a different name. Markson had served as a consultant until his retirement. A few of his old colleagues had gone on to cushy defense contracts. The same circle of snakes. Emma touched my arm gently. "You okay?" I looked at her. "No, but I'm not done yet." I got up, poured another cup of coffee, and stared at the letter again. Abby's words blurred slightly as the steam rose between us. 25 years of hate turned to confusion in a single afternoon. I used to think revenge was simple. You find the person who broke you and you break them back. But this wasn't simple. This was layers of lies wrapped in family. "Your mom was smarter than anyone gave her credit for," I said quietly. "She kept records, names, dates. If she wanted me to have this, she meant for me to finish what she started." Emma met my eyes. "Then we will." There was no dramatic music, no declaration of war. Just a quiet understanding between two women connected by a ghost and a key. I folded the letter, slipped it back into the envelope, and stacked the papers neatly. Then I looked at Emma. "Get some rest," I said. "Tomorrow, we start digging." She nodded, tired but resolute. As she walked toward the guest room, I sat back down, the letter still in my hand. The clock ticked somewhere behind me, steady and familiar. I stared at the folder on the table, the old logo of Keller Dynamics printed across the front. For the first time in 25 years, I felt something close to purpose. The next morning, the first thing I did was brew coffee strong enough to stand a spoon upright in it. The house was quiet, except for the old clock ticking in the hallway. Emma was still asleep on the couch. She must have been exhausted from the drive and everything that came after. I looked at her for a moment. She was too young to be carrying this kind of weight, and too much like Abby for my peace of mind. I sat down at the table with the folder, the envelope, and my laptop. Years in logistics taught me one thing. Every number, every paper trail, leads somewhere. I started scanning the documents, making notes like I used to during investigations. Dates, signatures, project codes. Keller Dynamics had contracts tied to Air Force supply chains during the late 90s. One project name kept appearing. Operation High Point. I typed it into a search bar. Nothing. No public records, no official history. That told me everything I needed to know. It had been classified or buried. Emma shuffled into the kitchen, hair a mess, wrapped in a blanket like a burrito. "You've been up all night?" she asked. "Didn't sleep much," I said. "Your mom's story checks out, at least part of it. Keller Dynamics had defense contracts. The paperwork in her folder looks real." Emma rubbed her eyes. "So, what do we do now?" "We keep going. We find out who signed off on this mess and why your mom ended up the scapegoat." I pulled another stack of papers from the folder. Memos, internal emails printed on letterhead, and a few receipts handwritten. Messy, but real. Some were payments marked as consulting fees to accounts that didn't match any company vendor list. The same amounts showed up repeatedly, with Markson's initials scribbled beside them. "Jesus," I muttered. He was stealing millions, not thousands. Emma leaned in. "And Mom found out?" "Looks like it." I tapped one note at the bottom of a memo. Abby had written, "They're using dummy vendors. Keller's laundering money through supply contracts." Em warned me to keep quiet. I said. "That's Markson. He used her position to clean his mess. When she wouldn't go along with it, he needed someone to take the fall." Emma frowned. "Why didn't she go to the police?" "Because military money's involved. You don't go to the cops when federal contracts are in play. You go to the Pentagon, or you disappear." She chose the latter. I leaned back, rubbing my temple. It wasn't just theft, it was corruption tied to national security. And the bastard at the center of it had retired with a medal and a pension. I grabbed my phone and called an old friend, Major Hank Peterson, retired like me, now teaching at the base. The man owed me more than a few favors. He picked up on the second ring. "Hayes? Damn, I thought you were dead." Not yet, I said. You still have access to defense contractor archives? He laughed. You calling to audit my students or something? Something, I said flatly. I need you to look up Keller Dynamics, contracts from 1996 to 2001, and a name Colonel Charles Markson. That got his attention. Silence for a moment, then a low whistle. Markson? Haven't heard that name in years. You digging into him? Let's just say I'm following a trail that shouldn't exist. I'll see what I can pull, he said. Might take a day. I'll owe you, I said. You already do, he replied, then hung up. Emma watched me set the phone down. Who was that? Someone who can dig in places Google can't. She smiled faintly. You're scarier than you look. Occupational hazard, I said. By afternoon, we decided to return to the storage unit to check the boxes we hadn't opened yet. I didn't want to leave anything behind that might fill in the blanks. The drive was quiet again, but different this time. Less dread, more focus. When we got there, the air smelled like metal and heat. The manager barely looked up as we signed in again. Inside, the unit felt smaller than I remembered. We dragged out the second box, labeled 2005, 2015. It was filled with personal records, bank statements, receipts, and letters addressed to me that were never mailed. Emma pulled out a small notebook and flipped through it. Look at this, she said. The pages were filled with Abby's handwriting, neat and deliberate. Each entry detailed small payments she made towards something labeled repayment fund. At the top of one page, she wrote, I took her savings, but I'll give her back her future. My throat tightened. Abby had been depositing money year after year, slowly rebuilding what she'd taken. Emma whispered. She really tried to fix it. Yeah, I said, staring at the notes. But she did it in silence, and silence doesn't clear your name. I picked up another file, copies of letters sent to the Defense Department. All of them were complaints about procurement fraud, signed anonymously. The last one, dated 2001, was marked, returned, insufficient information. They ignored her. I sat back against the wall, feeling the weight of it all settle in my chest. Abby had tried to fight the system alone, and it crushed her. Emma's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and frowned. Who's Hank Peterson? I blinked. That was fast. I took the call. Linda, Hank said, his voice low. You didn't hear this from me, but Keller Dynamics was blacklisted in 2003 after an internal audit flagged irregularities. The case got buried under national security exemption. Guess who signed the final report? Markson. Bingo. He retired clean. The audit lead was transferred overseas and resigned a month later. No follow-up. Whatever happened, they swept it deep. I stared at the floor. Can you send me the report? He hesitated. Officially, no. Unofficially. Check your email in an hour. He hung up. I turned to Emma. Looks like your mom wasn't crazy. I never thought she was, she said softly. I believed her. We loaded the rest of the boxes into my car. There were hundreds of pages, but one thing was clear: Abby didn't just vanish. She was erased. Back home, I spread everything across my dining table until it looked like a crime scene. Contracts, notes, bank records, anonymous letters, all pieces of the same broken puzzle. Emma stood by the window, arms crossed. If we take this to the media, will anyone believe it? Not without proof, I said. Paper alone won't cut it, but maybe there's something more. I pointed to the small cassette recorder we'd found earlier. If that thing works, it might be her voice. That. Emma plugged it in and pressed play. The tape whirred, then crackled. Static. And then Abby's voice, faint but clear. If anything happens to me, Linda, it's because I got too close. Markson's laundering funds through Keller. He's using my credentials. If you ever find this, don't trust anyone from the base. Record everything. Don't let them bury the truth like they buried Dad. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. My heart was pounding. She continued, Tell Linda I'm sorry. I didn't take her money to hurt her. I took it because it was the only way to keep us both alive. The tape clicked off. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The room felt colder somehow, even though the afternoon sun still poured through the blinds. I reached over and turned the tape back off. Well, I said, voice steady but low. Now we've got her side of the story. And I think it's time the rest of the world heard it too. I didn't say it as a threat. It was a decision. The cassette stopped spinning, but its echo hung in the room like it was still playing. I sat there with my hands flat on the table, staring at the little machine as if it might start talking again. My throat felt dry. Abby's voice had aged. Even on the tape it sounded calm, resigned. She'd been ready to die long before she actually did. Emma finally broke the silence. That means she knew someone was coming after her. Yeah, I said, and she still stayed close enough to keep records. That's not fear, that's strategy. I leaned back in the chair, studying the piles of documents spread across the table. Your mom wasn't running, she was buying time. Emma frowned. For what? For me, I said quietly. She knew I'd come looking someday. The realization hit harder than I expected. Abby hadn't vanished to disappear, she'd vanished to protect. And if she'd been trying to protect me from Markson, that meant the danger hadn't been theoretical. It was personal. I picked up the last item we hadn't opened yet, the second envelope with my name on it, thicker than the first. I hadn't noticed before, but the seal wasn't paper, it was wax, deep red, pressed with a shape that looked military, maybe from an old ring. Abby had always been dramatic like that. Emma looked uneasy. You sure you want to read it now? I gave a dry laugh. If I've survived Iraq, paperwork, and the VA office in July, I can handle this. The wax cracked as I tore it open. Inside were 6 handwritten pages. Abby's penmanship was shaky in places, but deliberate. The first line started with my name, Linda. If you found this, you probably hate me less than you used to. I hope that's true. You deserve the truth, even if it's 25 years late. I read every word, slowly. Abby wrote about Keller Dynamics' secret projects, about how they'd been funneling taxpayer money into shell operations through the Department of Defense. She'd found evidence of missing equipment, fake maintenance contracts, even duplicate parts lists for aircraft that didn't exist. Markson had ordered her to hide it in the books. When she refused, he framed her. He used her access codes to authorize transfers and then tipped off internal auditors to discover the theft. The same week, a classified memo was circulated internally, accusing Abigail Hayes of financial misconduct with possible intent to defect. And a preset. They branded her a traitor. I said quietly. Emma leaned forward. Defect? Like spy stuff? Cold War paranoia dies hard, I said. The military still loved that word. Defect made it easy to ruin someone fast. Abby's letter went on. When I realized what he'd done, I knew no one would believe me. You had clearance, Linda. If he linked my name to yours, you'd lose your career too. So I ran. I took the money to make it look real. I figured if I stayed gone, you could keep your life. Bite. I stopped reading for a second, rubbed my temple. She was saving me by destroying herself, I muttered. Hell of a plan. Emma's voice was soft. She thought she didn't have another choice. I kept reading. Abby wrote that she'd spent years collecting evidence from afar, keeping records in the storage unit and monitoring Keller's financial movements through old contacts. She'd even contacted an investigative journalist once. But the man died in what was called a traffic accident a week later. Her last line froze me. If Markson is still alive, don't confront him. He won't hesitate. But don't let him rewrite our story. Not yours. Not mine. I set the letter down, staring at the words until they blurred. Emma was quiet. Then she said, You're not going to listen to that part, are you? I gave her a tired half smile. You're learning. Hem? I stood, stretched my back, and started packing the documents into folders. My old military instincts had kicked in, the kind that don't let you rest until the mission's clear. Abby had handed me a target wrapped in red tape, and I'd spent my life cutting through worse. We worked together for the rest of the morning, scanning, labeling, organizing. Emma handled the photos while I sorted financial records into a timeline. The more we lined things up, the clearer it became. Keller Dynamics was a shell game, and Markson had been the dealer. At some point, I looked at Emma. You hungry? She blinked, surprised. I guess. Good. There's a diner down the street that still makes coffee the way God intended, black and bitter. She smiled for the first time all day. You sound like her, you know. Don't ruin my appetite, I said, but I couldn't help smiling too. We ate in silence for a while, the clatter of dishes filling the gaps words couldn't. I caught Emma watching me a few times like she was trying to piece together who I'd been before all this. I wasn't sure myself. Halfway through my coffee, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered out of habit. Linda Hayes? A man's voice asked. Yes. This is Hank Peterson again. You didn't get this from me, but I just forwarded you a file. It's from a declassified audit report, Project High Point. Read the last page. He hung up before I could reply. I opened my email. The file was an old scanned report with half the text redacted. The last page had a short paragraph. Due to irregularities in financial tracking, lead civilian accountant Abigail Hayes has been removed from post. Review conducted and authorized by Colonel C. Markson. File closed. I stared at it. That son of a bitch signed her out of existence. Emma read over my shoulder. It's right there. Proof. And proof of what? I said. That he was thorough? He made it official. Nobody questions a report stamped national security. She looked angry now, really angry. Then let's question it. Her voice reminded me of myself 30 years ago. I almost laughed at the irony. Easy, Tiger. You go charging in without a plan, and the system eats you whole. Then we make a plan, she shot back. I nodded slowly. We will. Now, we went back home and spread everything out again, this time on the living room floor. The papers covered every surface. Emma sat cross-legged with a pen and legal pad, scribbling connections while I traced financial routes through the old records. The rhythm felt familiar, like prepping for a mission again. Every few minutes we'd find another piece of the puzzle. A date, a code, a name. One entry caught my eye: payments routed through an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under a subsidiary called Harper Procurement LLC. Emma, I said. This name ring any bells? She shook her head. Harper's Markson's wife's maiden name, I said. She looked stunned. So he funneled stolen money through his wife's fake company? Classic move, I said. Plausible deniability and tax-free sunshine. It's disgusting, but clever. We kept working until the sun dipped low. The house grew darker, but I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. My mind was already lit up with anger and something else purpose. Emma finally sat back, exhausted. You think he's still alive? Oh, he's alive, I said. Men like Markson don't die quietly. They fade into consultancy roles in golf clubs. She grinned faintly. So, what do we do? I looked at the files spread before us. We do what your mom started. Emma nodded. We bring him down? Not just him, I said. Everyone who helped bury her. I stood and started stacking the folders into a neat pile. Abby's handwriting peeked out from the top one, steady, proud, defiant. I picked it up, read her name again, and felt the old ache in my chest twist into something sharper. She'd spent her life hiding the truth. I was going to spend mine making sure it was seen. By the next morning, my kitchen looked like a crime lab. Every inch of the table was covered with paper trails, highlighters, and sticky notes. I hadn't felt this focused in years. My coffee had gone cold twice, but I kept drinking it anyway. Emma sat across from me with her laptop open, typing faster than I thought a human could. She'd been digging into Keller Dynamics online while I cross-checked financials from Abby's notes. Half the company's history had been wiped clean from the internet. New name, new CEO, new image. But I recognized the logo hidden in a corner of their website, an updated version of the same one stamped on Abby's old documents. Found something, Emma said. Keller Dynamics merged with another defense firm in 2012, now it's called Westbridge Systems, headquarters in Arlington. I leaned forward. Who's on the board? She scrolled through a page. A lot of corporate types. But one name stands out: Charles R. Markson, Senior Advisor Emeritus. Of course, I said. The bastard never really retired. Emma's expression hardened. You think he still has the records? Maybe, I said. But I doubt he keeps his skeletons in a file cabinet. Guys like him, everything's offshore or buried behind shell companies. You have to dig where they don't expect. She grinned. Lucky for you, I took a cybersecurity course in college. Please tell me it wasn't one of those YouTube tutorials with a cartoon hacker mascot. It was accredited, she said, mock offended. I raised an eyebrow. So was the DMV, and that didn't stop them from losing my license twice. She snorted. Just watch. She started tracing a domain chain from Keller's old email servers to their new infrastructure. Within an hour, she'd found something odd. An unlisted archive subdomain still registered to Keller Dynamics. No public links, but still active. She looked at me like a kid on Christmas morning. You think we can access it? I smiled for the first time in hours. I think we just found the key your mom wanted us to use. Emma ran a decryption tool while I checked the metadata on the files. Most were harmless technical reports, maintenance logs, scanned invoices. But one stood out. A folder titled HPT02CLASSIFIED, dated 2000. The same year Abby disappeared. Emma clicked it open. Inside were PDF scans of budget authorizations, one after another. Each page listed large transfers, millions of dollars under strategic development. One had a handwritten note in the margin. Reallocation approved. CM. CM, I muttered. Charles Markson. The transfers matched the exact amounts Abby listed in her notes as missing funds. She'd been right all along. Emma leaned closer. Linda, look at this. She zoomed in on one page. At the bottom, a name was typed. Prepared by A. Hayes. I felt something twist in my chest. He used her signature. Emma's voice was quiet. He forged everything. I nodded. And when the audit came, it looked like she'd moved the money herself. Classic setup. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Then I said, download everything. Every file, every email, every damn bite of it. If Keller or whatever they call themselves now finds out we accessed this, they'll scrub it clean. She nodded and started copying files onto an external drive. My military brain was already 10 steps ahead. Chain of custody, evidence, integrity, verification. If this went public, we needed to make sure no one could say it was fabricated. I started drafting a list of names. People Markson might have worked with, officers who'd signed off on contracts, journalists who'd covered Keller over the years. One name jumped out from the archives, a Major William Branson, listed as project auditor in 1999. I picked up my phone and called Hank again. Linda, he said, I was wondering when you'd call. You owe me another drink. Add it to my tab. You ever hear of a Major Branson? Used to audit Keller Dynamics around 99? Hank paused. Yeah, Branson. Quiet guy. Transferred to Europe right after the Keller mess blew up. Why? Because his name's all over these records. Think he'd talk? Last I heard, he's in Arizona. Runs a security consultancy out of Tucson. You want his number? I'd appreciate it. That. He read it off, and I wrote it down. Before hanging up, he added, Careful with this one, Linda. You're poking the kind of people who still think they're above the law. I smiled faintly. Good thing I stopped believing in that a long time ago. After the call, I turned to Emma. We're going to Arizona. Her eyes widened. You serious? I don't joke about road trips. We left that afternoon. I packed the documents, the hard drive, and a small duffel with enough caffeine pills to keep an elephant awake. The drive took 10 hours with breaks. And somewhere between Fort Stockton and Tucson, I realized how strange it felt having company on a mission again. Emma kept the playlist simple classic rock, nothing too depressing. Somewhere near El Paso, she turned down the music and said, You really think this Branson guy's gonna tell us the truth? If he's still alive, he will, I said. If not, maybe his silence tells us something too. By the time we reached Tucson, the sun was bleeding out behind the desert hills. Branson's office was in a strip mall between a pawn shop and a chiropractor. The sign out front said Branson Security and Consulting in fading blue paint. I knocked twice. The man who opened the door looked older than I remembered from his file photo. White hair, reading glasses, and a limp that spoke of bad knees and worse memories. Can I help you? He asked. Major Branson? I said. Used to be. And you are? Linda Hayes. We served under Markson's command. That got his attention. He gestured us inside. The office was cluttered with old files and coffee cups. He shut the door, then turned to face us. You said Markson, he said carefully. Why? Because he destroyed my sister's life, I said. And I think you know how. He studied me for a long time, then sank into his chair with a sigh. Abby Hayes, Jesus. I always wondered what happened to her. I stayed standing. You were the auditor. You saw the reports. I saw them, he said. And I saw what they did to her. But by the time I realized it was a setup, It was too late. They'd already filed the charges, classified the files, and made sure no one could touch them. Did you know about the forged authorizations? He nodded slowly. I suspected. But Markson controlled the flow of information. Every request for clarification went through him. And if you pushed too hard, you got reassigned. Emma spoke up. Why didn't you say anything? He looked at her with tired eyes. Because people who talked about Keller ended up in accidents. The room fell silent. He leaned forward. But if you've got something proof, it's not too late. I can help you make it official. I've got old contacts at the Inspector General's office. Off the record. For now. I handed him the hard drive. Then start with this. It's everything Keller and Markson buried. He plugged it into his computer. The screen lit up with folder names. I watched as his face changed from curiosity to shock. My God, he whispered. You have it all. Thanks to Abby, I said. He looked at me. Then maybe it's time to finish what she started. I nodded, though my jaw was tight. No maybe about it. Emma's reflection in the window caught my eye. She looked determined strong in a way that reminded me of both her mother and me. I didn't say it out loud, but for the first time, I felt like this wasn't just my fight anymore. Branson started printing documents while I stood by the window, watching the desert sky fade from orange to black. The hum of the printer filled the silence. Every sheet that came out was another nail in the coffin of the man who thought he'd buried us. The sound of the printer clicked rhythmically, page after page sliding out, each one a fragment of the story Keller Dynamics spent 2 decades trying to bury. I stood near the window while Branson read through them, his expression hardening with every line. Emma paced behind him, restless, fingers drumming against the desk. When the last page printed, Branson set it down carefully. Linda, he said, his voice low, this is enough to trigger a federal investigation if it gets to the right hands. But if you go through official channels, they'll bury it again before you even finish your coffee. Then we don't go official, I said. We go public. He frowned. You mean the press? Yeah, someone with reach and guts. Somebody who's not scared of rattling the Pentagon silverware. Branson hesitated. That'll bring attention. Dangerous attention. I smiled without humor. Good. Let them look me in the eye. Emma nodded beside me, a spark of fire in her expression. We'll make them listen. Branson leaned back, rubbing his temples. I'll give you a name, someone I trust. Reporter named Kevin Adler. Used to cover defense scandals for the Sentinel. Lost his job after publishing something too close to the truth about weapons contracts. If anyone will take this, it's him. He scribbled an address and a number on a yellow sticky note. He lives in Phoenix now. Doesn't take calls from unknowns. But if you show up with this, he tapped the hard drive. He'll listen. I took the note, folded it once, and slipped it into my pocket. You've done your part, Major. The rest is on me. He looked at me a long moment. You know they'll come after you for this, right? They already did, I said, 25 years ago. We left the office around dusk. The Arizona air was dry and sharp, the kind that cuts through fatigue. I drove while Emma watched the desert roll past, the glow of the dashboard casting faint light across her face. For the first time, she didn't look like a scared kid trying to solve her mother's mystery. She looked like someone ready to finish a war. Your mom would have liked this, I said quietly. She turned to me. What do you mean? Seeing us team up, 2 stubborn women refusing to stay quiet. That earned me a small grin. She always said silence was just another kind of surrender. And aside me, she was right, I said. We reached Phoenix just before midnight. The address Branson gave us led to a rundown apartment complex on the east side of town. The sign outside said, Whispering Palms, which was funny because the only thing whispering was the wind through the half-dead trees. I parked under a flickering streetlight. Emma clutched the hard drive like it was made of gold. You sure about this? She asked. I've been sure since the day that safe was empty. My. We climbed the stairs and knocked on the door marked 2B. For a minute, nothing. Then locks turned, one by one. The man who opened the door looked like someone who'd seen too much coffee and not enough sunlight. Mid-40s, glasses, scruffy beard, t-shirt that said, Question everything. He squinted at us. If you're selling religion or solar panels, I'm good. Kevin Adler? I asked. Who's asking? Linda Hayes. I've got something that'll make your career and probably get both of us audited by breakfast. That got a raised eyebrow. You a Fed? Worse, I said, retired Air Force. He stepped aside. Well, hell, come on in. The place smelled like burnt coffee and conspiracy theories. Papers covered the walls, red strings connecting faces and places. It looked like he'd tried to map out every lie the government ever told. Emma placed the hard drive on the table. You might want to sit down. Arlie. He plugged it into his laptop, clicked through the folders, and started reading. The deeper he went, the wider his eyes got. Jesus Christ, he whispered. These are government contracts, procurement records, signatures, transfers. He looked up. Where did you get this? From a storage unit my sister left behind, I said. She was the accountant they framed for Keller Dynamics fraud. He froze. Abigail Hayes? I stiffened. You know her name? I covered her case when I was a junior reporter, he said. Everyone thought she ran off with the money. The DOD shut the story down fast, said it was classified. They called her a traitor. Yeah, I said. They lied. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. If I publish this, it'll explode. You realize that, right? Markson, Keller, the contracts this ties into congressional oversight committees, national budgets, everything. You'll be in the crosshairs. My net. Good, I said. Then they'll finally have to see me. He smiled faintly. You're serious. Completely. He studied me a moment longer, then nodded. All right. I'll verify the documents, cross-check with public records, and prepare a report. But if this leaks before I finish, it disappears forever. You understand? I do, I said. Just make sure her name's cleared. Emma looked at him, and her story's told. He met her gaze. That too. We left around 2 a.m. I didn't feel relief, just a steady kind of calm. Like before a flight mission. You check every switch, every gauge, and then you let go, because control ends the moment you take off. In the parking lot, Emma exhaled hard. Do you think he'll really do it? He's a journalist, I said. They live for this kind of chaos. She smiled. You're not bad at it yourself. I shrugged. Comes with the uniform. We drove back toward the highway, the city lights fading behind us. My phone buzzed halfway to the motel, a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. HP. Hank Peterson. I pulled over on the shoulder and called him back. Linda, he said, voice tight. I don't know what you did, but people are asking questions about you. Some old defense guys are sniffing around Keller's archives again. They want to know who accessed restricted files. Let them wonder, I said. This isn't small time, Hayes. Markson still has friends. If Adler publishes, you'll have more than lawyers at your door. I've had worse, I said. You know that. There was a pause. Yeah, I do. But you're not in uniform anymore. Be smart. I'll try, I said, though I didn't mean it. I hung up. Emma looked worried. What's going on? Nothing we can't handle, I said. You hungry? There's a 24-hour diner ahead. She stared at me like she didn't know whether to laugh or panic. You really don't stop, do you? Kid, I said, starting the car. If I stopped every time a man told me to be careful, I'd still be waiting tables at the base commissary. The road stretched out ahead, long and dark, the kind of quiet that makes every thought louder. I wasn't scared. I was too old and too angry for fear. Abby spent her life running from Markson's lies. Mine was about to be spent dragging them into the light. As the first streaks of dawn cut across the desert, Emma leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. I drove on, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the folder beside me, the one with my sister's handwriting still on it. Some debts can't be paid with money. Only truth. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds and hit me square in the eyes. I'd slept sitting upright in the motel chair, boots still on, jacket half-zipped. My neck felt like rebar. Emma was at the small table by the window, laptop open, headphones in. She looked focused in that intense, quiet way her mother used to get when crunching numbers. I poured the motel's sorry excuse for coffee into a styrofoam cup. Tell me you're not watching cat videos. She smirked without looking up. I'm tracking Keller's current contracts. Or, technically, Westbridge Systems contracts. Impressive, I said. You sleep? 2 hours. Maybe. She finally looked at me. Adler emailed. He verified half the files. Said the rest matched Department of Defense procurement data. He's running the story tonight. I froze mid-sip. Tonight? Yeah. He said timing's perfect. Some congressional hearing tomorrow on defense transparency. He's going to drop it right before. I couldn't help but grin. That's poetic. Emma smiled too, though her eyes looked tired. He also said he's naming Mom directly, clearing her record publicly. That hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, and I set the cup down before I spilled it. Good. It's about damn time. She hesitated. He's naming you too. I raised an eyebrow. As what, the cranky old lady with too much coffee and a grudge? As her sister, Emma said softly. As the person who brought the evidence forward. You'll be in it with her. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My name next to Abby's, 25 years apart, reunited by truth and tragedy. Well, I said finally, guess that means I better get a haircut. Emma laughed, but it was the kind that carried a little sadness with it. Around noon, Adler called. He sounded wired, the kind of voice that runs on adrenaline and caffeine. Linda, I've confirmed 3 separate signatures linking Markson to the Keller accounts. One's in his own handwriting. The story goes live at 6. Once it's up, you're going to have reporters and maybe feds sniffing around. Be ready. Now. Always am, I said. And Linda. Yeah? You did the right thing. He hung up before I could answer. I looked out the window at the parking lot, the heat shimmering off the asphalt. Doing the right thing. That was easy to say from a safe distance. I wasn't sure what it meant when you'd spent half your life angry enough to bite steel. Emma closed her laptop. So, what now? Now we wait. The hours crawled. We killed time with bad diner food and cable news in the background. At 5:58 p.m., Adler's byline popped up on the Sentinel's homepage. Defense contractor fraud exposed. Colonel linked to decades. Long cover. Up. The photo underneath was one I hadn't seen in years, Abby in uniform. Smiling, proud, not yet broken. My chest tightened. Emma gasped. Oh my God, look. The article laid it all out. Keller Dynamics forged documents, the dummy corporations, the money funneled offshore. It named Markson directly and confirmed Abby had been framed. Her reputation, our family's name, was restored in black and white for the world to see. By 6:30, it had gone viral. Other outlets picked it up. Military news networks, political blogs, even mainstream cable started calling it the Keller conspiracy. I sat on the bed, staring at the screen. My sister wasn't a thief anymore. She was a whistleblower one who died for telling the truth. Emma wiped her eyes. She'd be proud of you. She'd probably call me an idiot for getting involved, I said, but my voice cracked halfway through. Then came the part I didn't expect the phone calls. Not reporters, not agents, old military contacts. People I hadn't heard from in years. First was Hank. You did it, he said. The brass are panicking. The DoD just announced a review of Keller's old contracts. Markson's name's already trending. You might actually burn this thing down. I'm not looking for fire, I said. Just sunlight. How was 10? He laughed. Same difference. Then a different voice came through later that night, a woman. Colonel Jessica Marsh, Pentagon Compliance Division. Miss Hayes, we're reopening your sister's case. Officially. I'd like to meet in person. I agreed. 2 days later, Emma and I drove to Washington. The city was buzzing, reporters swarming outside congressional offices, headlines screaming corruption. In the Pentagon's gray hallways, the air felt heavier, like history itself didn't want to breathe. We met Colonel Marsh in a small briefing room. She was calm, professional, and surprisingly kind. I read the article, she said. You have no idea how much noise it's caused. But I also read the original Keller files. She pushed a folder toward me. Your sister was right. The audit was manipulated. We're issuing a full exoneration and posthumous commendation for integrity in service. I stared at her. You're serious? She nodded. Completely. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, blinking at the folder like it was a mirage. Emma reached over and put her hand on mine, steady and warm. Colonel Marsh continued, there will also be an inquiry into Markson's assets. We've frozen several accounts already. If he's still alive, he won't be hiding for long. I swallowed hard. Then maybe justice isn't extinct after all. Marsh smiled faintly. Just endangered. When we left the building, reporters shouted questions. I didn't stop. Emma held onto my arm as we walked down the marble steps into the sunlight. For the first time in 25 years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free. That night, in a small DC hotel room, we ordered takeout and watched the news coverage. The anchor was reading Abby's name aloud, clear, respectful, untainted. Emma set down her food. You think she'd forgive herself now? I thought about that for a long time. I think she already did, I said. She just needed the world to catch up. Emma looked down, then said quietly, I used to hate her sometimes. For leaving me, for not telling me who you were, but now, she trailed off, eyes glistening. Now I think she just didn't want me to live scared. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. She raised you right, kid. She laughed weakly. You sound like her again. I'm starting to notice that, I said. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the window. The sound felt peaceful, steady, like a heartbeat finally slowing down. Emma glanced at the screen. They're calling it a landmark case. Keller stocks tanking. Markson's name's everywhere. I nodded. He built his empire on lies. It's about time it fell under its own weight. She studied me for a moment. You don't look happy. I leaned back in my chair. Happiness isn't the goal. Peace is. She smiled faintly. Then I think you're close. Maybe I was. Later that night, Emma went to bed early. I stayed up, flipping through the old letters one more time. Abby's handwriting danced across the pages, strong, stubborn, certain. The last line still hit like a punch to the gut. If you're reading this, it means I finally found my way home. I whispered into the quiet room. You did, Abby. You're home. The words didn't echo, they settled, like dust finally finding its place. And for the first time in decades, I slept through the night without dreaming of loss. The morning after Abby's name was cleared, I woke up to a silence I hadn't felt in years, a kind of heavy calm, like the world had finally stopped holding its breath. Emma was still asleep, curled up under the blanket with her laptop beside her. The TV in the corner was on mute, flashing headlines about Keller dynamics, Senate hearings, and new revelations in defense corruption. I missed in 10. I got up, stretched my back until it popped, and poured myself a cup of stale hotel coffee. The taste was awful, but it felt earned. Abby's name was no longer a curse. That alone should have been enough. But something still burned in me, unfinished business. The kind that doesn't go away with a headline. Markson. His name was all over the news, but not his face. Every network used old photos from when he was a colonel, all medals and fake smiles. No one had seen him in years. The last record of him was from 2017. He'd been living quietly in Virginia, advising defense firms from the comfort of his suburban palace. I sat down and pulled up the article on my phone. Buried halfway down was a single line that made my pulse quicken. Sources report that retired Colonel Charles Markson has not responded to requests for comment. I knew what that meant. The man was hiding. And I'd spent too many years chasing ghosts to let this one rest. When Emma woke up, she found me already dressed, boots laced tight. You're going somewhere? She asked, still groggy. Virginia, I said. She blinked. You're kidding. Not even close. Linda, she said carefully. The man's probably surrounded by lawyers and bodyguards. You can't just knock on his door. I can if I bring the truth with me. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. You know this isn't about revenge anymore. I looked at her. You sure about that? She stared for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I'm coming with you. I didn't argue. We rented a car and drove through the fog-drenched highways of Virginia, the kind that feel older than the country itself. By the time we reached Fairfax, the sun was low, and the air smelled like wet pine. Markson's address led us to a sprawling property on a cul-de-sac lined with perfect lawns and expensive silence. We parked a block away. The place looked exactly like the man himself, clean, polished, built on a foundation of bullshit. Emma frowned. You think he'll talk to us? He'll talk, I said. He just doesn't know it yet. We walked up the path, and before I could knock, the door opened. A tall man in his 70s stood there, hair white, eyes sharp as glass. Even age hadn't dulled that military arrogance. Miss Hayes, he said before I could speak. I was wondering when you'd show up. You. The voice hit me like a cold wind. He knew. Then you already know why I'm here, I said. He smiled faintly. To clear your conscience? Or to ruin mine? Yours doesn't need my help, I said. It's been rotting on its own. He opened the door wider. Come in then. Let's not make a scene for the neighbors. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and old money. Framed commendations lined the walls. Photos of him shaking hands with generals, senators, presidents, all men who had probably forgotten his name but not his usefulness. Emma stood close behind me, clutching her phone like it was armor. Markson gestured toward the sitting room. You've made quite the mess in Washington. I suppose congratulations are in order. Don't flatter yourself, I said. This isn't about you getting caught, it's about my sister. He nodded slowly. Abigail. She was a brilliant woman. Shame she didn't know when to stay quiet. My jaw tightened. You ruined her life. And I protected the program, he said. High Point was classified for a reason. She was a liability. She was a patriot, I snapped. And you used her as a shield. He leaned forward, unbothered. You think you understand how the world works, Captain? You don't. You expose one operation, you jeopardize a dozen others. Lives were at stake. Bullshit, I said. The only life you cared about was your own. Emma's voice cut through the tension. She had proof. You forged her signature. You framed her. Markson's eyes flicked toward her, amused. Ah, the daughter. I wondered if she'd show up. You look just like her mother. The same misplaced sense of justice. She took a step forward. You don't get to talk about her. I put a hand on her arm before she did something rash. Markson turned back to me. So what now? You've already dragged my name through the mud. What do you want an apology? I looked him dead in the eye. No, I want you to live with the truth. End quote. He chuckled. The truth doesn't matter, Miss Hayes. The system doesn't care who's right. It cares who writes the report. Then I guess it's a good thing the whole country's reading it now, I said. That made him pause. Just for a second, the smugness cracked. He'd been untouchable for so long he didn't think the world could catch up. But it had. I pulled a small recorder from my jacket pocket and set it on the table. Say her name, I said. He frowned. What? Say her name, I repeated. Say what you did to Abby Hayes. He stared at me for a long time, his jaw clenched. Then he looked away. You wouldn't understand, he muttered. I pressed the button. The recorder clicked to life. You're right, I said. I don't understand how a man with all your medals can look in the mirror knowing he built his career on destroying someone who trusted him. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, quietly, he said it. I did what I had to do. Not remorse. Not confession. Just cowardice dressed as duty. I turned off the recorder and stood. That's all I needed. Emma followed me toward the door, but before we stepped out, I turned back. You'll spend the rest of your life watching your name turn to dust. That's not revenge, Colonel. That's justice catching up. He didn't answer. He just sat there, still as a statue, his medals gleaming dully in the dim light. Outside, the air felt clean again. I handed Emma the recorder. Keep it safe. She looked at me. You're not angry? I shook my head. Not anymore. Anger's heavy. I've carried it long enough. We walked back to the car in silence, the weight of the past finally lifting with each step. As I started the engine, Emma said softly, You think he'll ever admit it publicly? No, I said. But he doesn't have to. Everyone already knows. The tires crunched over the gravel as we drove away. Behind us, Markson's perfect house shrank in the rearview mirror until it was just a dot, like a bad memory fading into the distance. For the first time since this all began, I didn't feel like I was chasing ghosts anymore. I'd found them, faced them, and finally let them rest. We drove through the night, back toward San Antonio, headlights slicing through the fog that clung to the empty highway. The radio murmured low news updates about Keller Dynamics' collapse, congressional statements, and the whistleblower sisters who exposed a decades-old military fraud. They used both our names now, mine and Abby's, as if we'd done it together. Maybe we had, just 25 years apart. Emma was half asleep in the passenger seat, head resting against the window, her reflection blurred by streaks of rain. The world outside was still dark, but I could feel dawn somewhere ahead. When we finally got home, I parked in the driveway and just sat there, listening to the engine tick. The house looked the same as always, quiet, small, untouched. But I wasn't the same woman who'd walked out of it. Inside, the kitchen still smelled faintly of burnt coffee. I left the lights off, poured myself a glass of water, and stood by the sink. The silence felt different now, peaceful, instead of hollow. Abby's box sat on the table where I'd left it, neat and closed, her handwriting still bold across the top. Emma wandered in, rubbing her eyes. "You're not sleeping?" "Never was good at that," I said. She smiled faintly, leaning on the counter. "They're saying Keller Dynamics stock dropped 40% overnight. The Justice Department's launching a full investigation. Markson's name is everywhere." "Good," I said. "About time someone else carried that weight." She hesitated, then added, "They're also planning a memorial recognition for Mom. The Pentagon wants you there. They're awarding her the Medal of Civil Merit for exposing corruption under threat of her own life." I froze for a second, the words sinking in slow. "They're giving her a medal. Posthumously," Emma said quietly. "They want you to accept it." I didn't say anything. For years, I'd imagined this moment some kind of reckoning, maybe even redemption. But hearing it out loud, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt strange, like trying to celebrate after a storm when half the town's gone. Emma must have sensed it. "You don't have to go," she said softly. "If it feels wrong..." "It doesn't feel wrong," I said. "It just feels late." She nodded. "Sometimes late is all we get." We spent the morning sorting through the last of Abby's things, the letters, the notebooks, the old photos. I found one of us as kids. She's holding a model airplane. I'm squinting into the sun, trying to look serious. She'd written on the back in neat blue ink, "To my sister, who always aims higher." It made me laugh. She'd always been the dreamer, the one who believed in happy endings. I was the one who cleaned up the mess. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man in uniform, an army courier holding a sealed envelope. "Captain Hayes?" he asked. "Retired," I said. He smiled politely. "Ma'am, this is from the Department of Defense." I signed the clipboard, took the envelope, and closed the door. Emma followed me into the kitchen as I broke the seal. Inside was an invitation official, crisp, signed by the Secretary of Defense himself, in recognition of Abigail Hayes' integrity and sacrifice in service to the nation. I set it down on the table. "Well," I said, "she finally made it to the Pentagon after all." Emma grinned. "Guess we're going to Washington again." 2 weeks later, we stood in the Pentagon auditorium, under the bright lights and polished marble that always smelled faintly of disinfectant and history. The crowd was full of uniforms, suits, and cameras. A man at the podium read Abby's citation words like valor, truth, and sacrifice echoing off the walls. When they called my name, I walked up, accepted the framed medal, and shook the secretary's hand. Cameras flashed. Applause filled the room. But what I remember most wasn't the applause. It was looking out into the crowd and seeing Emma standing tall, tears in her eyes, chin lifted just like Abby used to do when she was trying not to cry. After the ceremony, I didn't linger. I walked outside into the cool air. The Pentagon courtyard was quiet, flags rippling in the wind. I pulled the small velvet box from my pocket and opened it. The metal gleamed in the sunlight, heavy and beautiful in a way that metals tend to be when they're too late to matter. Emma joined me a few minutes later. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just thinking." She looked down at the medal. "You did it, you know. You gave her back her name." I nodded. "Yeah, but justice isn't really about fixing the past. It's about making sure the truth doesn't die with it." She smiled faintly. "Mom would have liked that." Your mom would have told me to stop brooding and buy her a drink," I said. That made her laugh, and for a second, it felt like Abby was standing right there between us, smirking, arms crossed, proud and stubborn as ever. We left the Pentagon and drove straight to Arlington Cemetery. I'd brought something with me, a small wooden box, same one Abby had kept her service pins in. I placed the new medal inside, right next to hers. The wind was sharp, carrying the faint hum of a bugle from somewhere far off. Emma knelt beside me. "You think she knows?" "I think she always did," I said. "She just needed me to catch up." We stood there for a while, neither of us speaking. Then Emma whispered, I made a promise to myself. When all this started, I wanted revenge. I wanted someone to pay. But now, I just want to live in a way that would make her proud. I looked at her, the sunlight catching her hair just right. That's all any of us can do. She smiled softly. And you? Me? I said, glancing at the horizon. I think it's time I finally go home. We walked back to the car, hand in hand. The path was long, lined with stones carved with names of people who'd carried burdens heavier than ours. For once, I didn't feel the weight of the years pressing down. I felt something else, lightness maybe, or peace. When we reached the car, Emma turned on the radio. A reporter's voice filled the air. The Pentagon has confirmed formal recognition for Abigail Hayes, whose courage and integrity led to one of the largest internal investigations in recent military history. I let it play. The world could have the story now. It was theirs to remember. As we drove away, the city faded in the rearview mirror. The road ahead was open, long, and bright with morning light. For the first time since Abby vanished, I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt like she was right where she was supposed to be, finally at rest, finally understood. And for me, that was enough.